back on track. Once again, I'm Stefan, and we're going to be going through some TDX updates as well as some new Lightning Web Component features and getting hands-on with those. And before we get started, like I said, I am great for spilling secrets from Salesforce, and so I will have to show you our forward-looking statement. So please make sure that you make any purchasing decisions based off of our currently available products and not any of the new cool stuff that I might be talking about today. However, most of it is ready to go and actually GA, but any of the TDX stuff is going to be still in beta and pilot phases. Are you sure? Okay, if you want, I can send you a copy. And so, like we said, we're going to go through a quick TDX update and some of the announcements and my favorite parts of TDX. We're going to get hands-on with Lightning Web Components, and we're going to take a look at the Lightning Email Builder that I'm sure no one has ever heard of, because I was shocked when I found out that this was a thing, and the new Nimbus components for mobile. And then we're going to do some Q&A. Okay, so when it comes to TDX, as we had a brief discussion about earlier, it has been rebranded to Trailblazer DX and is really now the Builders Conference for anyone who's building on Salesforce, Slack, MuleSoft, and Tableau. And from a content perspective, if you were there in person, you would have seen that that is where a lot of the content was focused. It was evenly divided up between all of those tools. There was still a lot of Salesforce developer content, admin content, and a lot of really cool stuff. One thing that I will point out is that I was made to wear a wizard hat and pull Cody out of a hat in the middle of the keynote. So that will be my embarrassment and my dues paid for the Salesforce world and being in developer relations. But as mentioned earlier, I have the privilege of building a lot of the keynote demos. And so for TDX, I built all of the demos and made sure that they were real. There was no vaporware there in any of the keynote demos, as well as for the developer keynotes at Dreamforce. And it was really fun. So Dreamforce is going to be coming up again as well. And then TDX will happen again next year. So if you can, it's well worth trying to get to one of those conferences because it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool and great content. And a lot of it's only available there in person. Now, it was also streamed on Salesforce Plus, all of the main shows, keynotes, and each of the special product keynotes like the developer keynotes and the admin keynotes. All of those are still there available for you to watch on Salesforce Plus. So if you go and sign up there, you can still view back all of this content. Unfortunately, the breakouts and theater sessions were only available in person. However, our team will be working with a lot of those product managers and leadership who delivered those sessions to record versions of them online so that some of that content is still available. Because there was some really valuable stuff that was shared at TDX. Now, one of the coolest things that we talked about at TDX in quite depth, and one of my favorite innovations coming out of Salesforce, is the way that we are integrating Slack into the Salesforce platform. So I'd love to get a show of hands online, if you can raise your hands or anyone in the room, if your company uses Slack. Okay, and Salesforce, I assume. I think that one's a given, being that you're here in the room. And the way that we're innovating around bringing Slack and Salesforce together is really cool. There are two ways at the moment that are going to be available first, and that is by bringing Flow into Slack so that you can run screen flows in your Slack environment, as well as the Apex SDK for Slack, which is really, really cool. And I'll talk about that quite a bit in a minute. But number one for Flow in Slack, it's great. It works really well, and it's as easy as just clicking a checkbox that makes your flow available in Slack, and then distributing that via an action. For the developers in the room, what's happening, though, is in your flow itself, in the config screen, you tick a checkbox that says make available in Slack, and it's generating an Apex action and call directly from a record-triggered flow to then take that screen flow and then deliver that into a specified Slack channel within your workspace. And so we're auto-generating an action there that you can go and grab and use to distribute your flows. There are also a number of Slack actions inside of Flow now. So if you go into the Actions palette inside of Flow Builder, there are loads of actions like sending a message, pinning a message, creating Slack channels, adding users that are available out of the box and will be available for anyone who is using Slack and Salesforce together, because it's going to be just default Salesforce features available to everyone. If you have a GS0 org or a sandbox, you may actually already start seeing those in your environment. I know GS0 in a preview environment, for sure they're in there. I'm not 100% sure on sandboxes, but they will be in use once you accept the terms and conditions. And like I said, you can distribute those same exact screen flows within Slack and within Salesforce. It's going into beta this summer. It's worth noting that at the moment, the only components available are display text and radio buttons. And so it's very niche use cases around collecting feedback and survey type use cases, because there's no free text inputs yet. However, obviously that will be on the roadmap and coming as the product matures into a GA state. But more impressively is the Apex SDK for Slack. And this is cool because you can build fully native Slack apps inside of Salesforce using the SDK. Traditionally, when building a Slack app, you have to build an application using a framework of theirs like Bolt that's available in JavaScript, Python, and Java to build your app, host it on a server, whether that be hosting it on AWS, on Heroku, wherever, and then installing it into a Slack environment. Well, with the Apex SDK for Slack, you can build Slack apps that are built on Salesforce in your Salesforce DX project and deploy them into a Slack environment. And I can actually give you quite a sneak peek with it now because I've been hands-on with this SDK a lot. And so right here in this Slack workspace, this is just a personal workspace that I used for TDX as well. So pretend that the Vonage branding isn't there at all. But I've created an app that takes flow and will allow you to take auto-launched flows and input them into Slack so that you can collect user input and trigger flows from Slack. In the same sense, you can also subscribe to different events in Slack from a flow via a platform event. And this is all built using the SDK. And so, for example, I can run a shortcut that says launch flow, and it will present me with a list of the auto-launched flows that I've configured. And it will allow me to then take that and assign input properties. So I can look up an opportunity, as well as set the stage. And then I can submit that here from Slack and really do any type of automation that I need to directly from Slack to make our users' lives easier, collect input from here, have context based on the channel, the user, etc. Now, how does that work? Well, it's all driven by the SDK. So inside of my Salesforce DX project, here I have what's called a Slack app. And in my Slack apps directory, I have this app that's aptly named Slacktions, because that is the name of my app. And this will be open source. This will be available via Salesforce Labs for everyone to use in a couple of months' time, once we go through security review. But what you see here is inside of our Slack app definition, we have a number of slash commands here. So we've got a command for getting connected. And you'll see what we're doing is pointing that action at an Apex class. And what we can do is run Apex that's defined using action handlers in Apex. Same thing, we've got the shortcut. So here's my launch flow shortcut here. And we can also subscribe to events. And so here I've set up some events called the app home opened event. So every time someone opens the app home page, every time someone shares a file, every time someone joins a channel. And in here, I can point it to an Apex class and handle the response and take the payload of that event that's coming from Slack and do something with it. And so, for example, if I go and look at one of those Apex classes, we have that class that took the flows and displayed the list of flows to the user. And so in there, I have my launch flow class. And what that's going to do is take that action handler, take the properties from that action, and then it's going to create a modal view in Slack. Go and get my view reference, which is going to be that surface that we're seeing, that modal content, and then send that back to the user in Slack. There is no server that you're hosting this on. This app is being hosted in your Salesforce org and connecting directly to Slack. And so if we go and look at what that view definition looks like in our SFDX project here, we have view definitions as a metadata item now, and I can look at my flow selector. And here I have a YAML definition that's going to construct that view. And what you'll see here is our component is defined as a modal. We can pass properties in through the schema here into our modal. We can create data providers that will go and query Salesforce when this UI is loaded, and then provide input fields here to collect information. And so, for example, you can see here, we're going to go and get that list of flow definitions through SOCL in this Apex class. And every time that modal is loaded, it's going to go and populate that input with those fields. And this just blows my mind. I think it's so cool that we've been able to take this and wrap this around all of the Slack APIs and really allow you to build complex solutions in Slack right from Salesforce. And if you can write Apex, like, it's super easy. Like, I've been writing Slack apps nonstop since I got my hands on the SDK. It's going to be in beta this summer, and hopefully a lot of people will be able to get their hands on it because it's going to be an open beta at this current time. I know if anyone here is attending Southeast Streaming, I'm going to do a hands-on workshop there on the Apex SDK, and hopefully we'll be able to distribute some of that content much more widely as we go forward. But it's super cool and going to allow for a lot of innovation around what you can do with Slack and Salesforce together. So enough on that and TDX stuff. Lightning Email Builder. In the room, who knew that there was a Lightning Email Builder? Great, great. Who knew that you could write Lightning Web Components for it? Awesome. So we've got something really new today that we're going to be going through. And so in Salesforce, in your email templates, once you've enabled Lightning emails, there is a Lightning Email Builder that allows you to drag and drop and build email content in Salesforce that you can send either via Pardot or via Salesforce itself, via the little send email action or through Apex. Okay. Obviously, it's a better send experience because your users can go and select the templates right from the record context in that send email action, and it's extensible because you can put Lightning components into it. Now, there are some drawbacks, okay? These Lightning Web Components are being rendered and called in the builder only. Okay, so when you pull an LWC into the email builder, it will run while you're building it, and it will save the output and state of that component when you save the email. So there are a lot of parts of Lightning Web Components that it doesn't support or will only support in that builder experience. So for example, you don't have any DOM APIs because you don't need access to the page inside of the builder. There is no rendered callback because the component in theory isn't rendering as part of the page. Okay, you can't fetch to external endpoints. There are no script tags. You can't access the window object. You can't use base components, and there is no wire service. Okay, this seems like a whole lot of limitations. However, in the context of building components for an email, a lot of these things aren't things that you would really want, except for being able to use a wire or actually go out and get data inside of the component itself. But there are ways of working around how that does work, and we'll go through those today. But it's still really cool. And after we go through this little hands-on exercise, I will show you an example of a way that this has been used and then packaged on the App Exchange in a really cool scenario for ways that you would build email for your users. Okay, and so instead of talking about it, I think it's best for us to start getting hands-on. Hopefully everyone has done the pre-work. If you do not have VS Code on your machine and running, that is okay. There is a Quip doc that we will have in a minute that has all of the instructions, and you'll be able to go through it at a later point in time. So to get started, I was going to make this a QR code, but then would realize that everyone would scan the QR code and the doc would open on their phone, and then they can't copy and paste anything. So we're going to have to go through the painful exercise of typing this out and sharing it into the chat.
I'm going to type it out right now.
Great. So everyone in the chat, you can click on the link. But this should take you to a public Quip doc that has some instructions. Okay, we're going to go through and we're going to do a lot of copy pasting today during this session. However, if you really want to type it all out, you can. But you can take this away and use this to learn how to expose Lightning Web Components into the Lightning Email Builder. So hopefully everyone's got started, and we're going to start out in this Quip doc. Okay, and the first thing that we're going to need to do is clone a repo that I've written that just has some scaffolded components in the project. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here for everyone on site as well. There we go. And we're going to start out just by running a git clone of this GitHub repo. So everyone needs to open up their terminal. If you're on a Mac or on a PC, open up your terminal and then go there and we can clone this repo. So that's not what we want to do. That's the live session link. I can copy that. Okay, everyone in the room, how are we doing? Have we been able to copy the repo?
Have we gotten to the quip?
I haven't gotten to the quip.
Yeah, let's get to the quip. There's the link again for anyone that needs it.
I think I need to restart here. So,
That's okay.
For folks virtual, have we gotten to the quip? Thumbs up if we've gotten to the quip. Okay, I see one. Brilliant, brilliant.
Cool. So once we've cloned that repo, we're going to want to cd into that directory. So into our new -lwc-features-workshop directory. And then once you've done that, we can just type in code dot, and when we press return, that will open up that project in VS Code for us. Go ahead and press return there. Let's see if we can all get to that state where we then have VS Code open in our directory. I'm going to go ahead and move this over as well. There we are. Nope, wrong way. Let's try that one more time. There we go. Okay.
Online's doing great.
Yep, online's doing great. Everyone, do we have this open in VS Code? You gonna watch? Okay, that's all right. Okay. What we need to do then here is set our default dev hub. And so you can go ahead and open the terminal here by pressing, if you're on a Mac, Control backtick. That will open up the VS Code terminal. Or you can open up the command palette and type in terminal. And then open that up. Okay, and then going back into our quip, we need to create a default scratch org. However, I've realized in this case, we probably don't have our default dev hub username set. So once again, in the command palette, you can set your default org here by typing in set a default org. If you've never been using the command palette before, you just press Command-Shift-P, and that will open up in VS Code for you. And then select your default dev hub org here. And so mine is to devhub.com. That way, when we create a scratch org, we will be able to assign that to our dev hub and open that up. Okay, do we all have our dev hub set? Great. Okay, we'll then go ahead and create a scratch org. And we'll open up the command palette again with Command-Shift-P. And then we can click on Create a Default Scratch Org. And that will generate a scratch org based off of this Salesforce DX project that we have cloned. So I will go ahead and run it, give it a name. I'll just go ahead and use the default. Set the number of days that we'd like the org to be valid for. I'd like mine for 30 days, is my default usually. And we can then go ahead and create our scratch org. And it failed because my default dev hub is not there, which I planned to happen because it's in the docs here. So just in case, we have this command here, this sfdx command in our code that says sfdx force config set default dev hub username, and then you can put your username in there as well. So I'm going to run that as well, and mine is stefan2@devhub.com. We'll go ahead and give everyone a minute because that will take a minute for us to go and copy and bring back. How's the chat doing?
They're still doing good.
Fantastic. And then once you've set your default dev hub, we can go ahead and create a default scratch org. And this is the crucial point, because until we've done this, we can't do anything else. Anyone who creates scratch orgs, this is like a daily thing, I'm sure. Perfect. My scratch org has been created. How's everyone else doing? Do we all have scratch orgs? Yep, great. Scratch orgs around the room, not yet? You will see here down at the bottom of the screen, your currently connected org. So if you're new to using VS Code, you can always see the default org here down in the toolbar at the bottom of VS Code so that you know which environment that you're working against. The instructions are there, so if anyone is getting stuck today, you can go ahead and get onto this tomorrow or at any other point in time. Okay, so going back to the instructions, we've just set our default dev hub username. Next thing we need to do is push this source into the org. So we're going to take everything that exists in this SFDX project and push it into our org. And once again, we can do that via the command palette. And we can say push source to default to scratch org and override conflicts. If you are using a developer org or a Trailhead org that you already have configured, you should still be able to push this, but it will say deploy instead of push source into the org. And so if you run that push source to org, it should take all of those items that we have just copied over from GitHub and deploy them into our org. Okay, and mine has successfully run. And it should have taken all of that code and put it in there. So if we open up, don't want to do that yet. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. If we go into our output tab, you will actually see here what metadata has been deployed. And you can see the whole list of things that we've pushed in, from Apex classes to Flexi pages to Lightning component bundles. All the stuff that we should be used to working with in Salesforce, but in metadata format. Okay. So now the next step here in our workshop is to open the org. And the easiest way is through this little icon down at the bottom of VS Code that we can click that will open us up into our org. Let me just move this into a different tab and rearrange my screens. Okay. So once we've opened up our org, the first thing we need to do is go into the quick find and setup and type in Lightning or Lightning email templates here. And we need to turn this feature on. And so in setup, in Lightning email templates, you can go ahead, hop into that tab and turn on folders and enhanced sharing. This is sort of the first gate that we need to cross in order to access Lightning email templates and these components. Then the next thing we need to do is if you go back over to the Quip doc, okay, there are 3 user permissions that need to be granted in order to use the Lightning email builder. Okay, you need to be able to access the drag and drop content builder. You need to be able to manage public Lightning email templates and create folders for Lightning email templates. I have already put those into a permission set for you. And so if you copy this Salesforce DX command here and run that in VS Code, it will assign that permission set to your user so that we don't have to go and do it in the UI. So if we pop over here and open up the terminal again, we can go ahead and paste that in and assign the permission set to you as the user. Okay. And once you do that, you now have access to the Lightning email builder. And so if we then go back over to the org, we can go into here. Actually, we probably need to do a refresh. So everyone do a quick refresh. And then here in the app launcher, we can go ahead and type in email templates. Now, you may already be using email templates in your company, but let's go ahead and create one here. And we're going to call this a test template. Okay, and we don't actually need to set anything else because we're not actually going to be sending it. We just want to explore the builder. And go ahead and save that. And once that record has been saved, you will see now we have an edit in builder button. Without access to that permission that states that you have access to the drag and drop builder, yes, I know it's a very, very vague setting in permissions. It just lets you edit the template and provide raw HTML. But when we click edit in builder, it's actually going to open a builder experience for email templates. And there are loads of out-of-the-box layout, well, not lots. There are 6 out-of-the-box layout components and 4 standard components that you can bring into the email template. So for example, if we want to bring a button onto the page, you can bring a button, you can style it. So you can set the text, the colors, the padding. You can bring images into your email template. You can bring rich text, which is great. I mean, it's a huge step up from what we've had before. And by default, it's a pretty cool feature. But what makes this even better, like I said before, is being able to bring LWCs into this, because then you can start to build your own styles. You can build your own styling components, your own email like image heroes. And the HTML and CSS in your LWCs becomes even more important because you can create like default components for your company's brand. And there's lots of really cool stuff you can do. So if we go back into the Quip doc, the next thing we want to do is open up VS Code, and we're going to update the components JS meta file with this new target here. This target, if you're used to exposing components into Salesforce, allows you to define and target and almost open up the gate of your component into different areas of Salesforce. And this target here for Lightning static emails is what exposes your components to the Lightning email builder. And so if we go ahead and copy this XML here, and we go into VS Code, in our /app directory, we have our Lightning Web components, and we have an email builder Hello World component. Like I said, in this component, it's very basic at the moment. We just have some HTML that says Hello World. We have a JavaScript class that does nothing yet. And then we have our meta.js or JS meta file. And so we're going to go ahead and override that with our Lightning static email target. And we're going to press save and deploy. If save to deploy isn't enabled by default, you can go ahead and right click on the component itself. And sorry, you can't, that's only deploy. You can press Command-Shift-P, open the palette, and then just push the source to your org. Okay, and once that's done, if we go back into the builder and refresh this page, our component is going to do nothing. However, we have a new custom component section that's been rendered in the Lightning Email Builder. And so we can take that custom component, zoom in here a little bit, and drag that into our space here. And we have our Hello World component that's being driven by our Lightning Web component. So to take this to the next level, let's look at what we can do here that makes it a bit more interesting. And so in our component, we've gone and added it to the page. So let's add a public property to our component that whoever is building email can use to configure the component. And in this case, I want to add an input that allows a user to select the font color of the text that's going to be rendering in the component. And we can do that by exposing a font color property publicly with the API decorator and set a default value there. We go into VS Code, sorry, on this side, and go into our components JavaScript file. Right here inside of the body of our JavaScript class, we can just add our public property for font color. Okay, and then we're going to save that or push that source to the org so that that's updated and we can access it in the JS meta file. Okay, we're then going to go through and open the JS meta file, and you'll see here we're going to add a target config that allows us to expose that font color publicly to the builder itself. And so we're going to copy that XML again and go back into our components JS meta file. And let's go ahead and just override that again. And go ahead and save that again. Push that source into the org. And then lastly, back in the JavaScript file, we're actually going to compute the style based off of that property. And so we can go ahead and copy this computed style getter. And when we do that and put that into our JavaScript, what that's going to do is compute the style using our public property. And so you can see here, we're constructing a string here using a template that merges in that font color property that we're declaring and allowing to be editable via the builder. And so once again, we can go ahead and save that. And just to show you where this computed style is being applied, in the HTML file here, I have a style tag on my element, and I'm just putting that computed style property here that's being assigned by the getter. And so that's always updated in real time based off of those properties changes. And so we can go ahead and save that. Okay, and if we go back into the builder once again, and we refresh the page, okay, and we add our email builder component, or here, our hello world. There we are. We now have that font color property that we've just exposed publicly, and we can change the color of our font and modify that based on, maybe not, the computed property there. Let's see what's going wrong there. Some quick debugging on the fly. We've got our computed style. We have our JavaScript file. Oh, it should just be color. That's my bad. So if anyone wants to remove the font color from that tag there, that is what is controlling it. And so now going back into the builder, let's try that one more time. We can now change our font color using that input parameter. And so hopefully you can start to see a little bit how you can create some really interesting components for composing emails from the builder. And now I want to show you how we can bring Salesforce data into the builder itself. And the way that we do this is via dynamic pick lists inside of our properties. And so back in VS Code, we're going to go into our Apex classes here. And in our Apex classes, we have an email builder dynamic pick list that I've written. Now, if you have put pick lists into your property editors as a data source before, it's exactly the same. You can go through, and what you're doing is creating a dynamic pick list row here that we can use to create pick lists for our component property editors. And what we're doing in this case is just querying ID and name from an account. And so what this pick list is going to do is query Salesforce data and allow us to merge it into that email builder based off of the actual component properties themselves. And then it's going to set the default as well here by doing that. And so you can see here we have two methods in our class. We have to get the default value and then just get all of the values that we want to display in that list. Now, obviously, this isn't a use case that you would be merging account names into an email. However, if you have a series of links that you might want to merge into the email, as it will be the example that I want to show you later, if you have some specific brand guidelines that you want to then query in like a metadata object that you want to pass into the template based on the selection, you can do things like that. And you've really got to put your developer hat on, but there's some cool things that you can do. And I don't want to spoil the demo in a minute, so I won't tell you what that is yet. But just know that you can query anything in Salesforce in any way that you want via a dynamic pick list here. So now what we need to do is go back into VS Code, and we're going to go ahead and add an account name public property here into our LWC. And so we can go back then into our Lightning Web components and into the Hello World component and into the JavaScript file. Okay, and in here, we're going to add that public property right below our font color. We're just going to set an account name, and we're going to default it to world and save that and push that to the org. All right, we can then go back to the JS meta file, and we're going to add one more property here for our account name property. And so go back into our JS meta file, and we're going to add in that last property here, where we're taking the account name property and we're assigning the values to that through a data source, and we're going to hit that email builder dynamic pick list Apex class. And so every time that this component is rendered in the builder and you have your component properties on the right-hand side, it's going to hit that Apex class and return whatever data is returned from that class into the builder. And so in this case, let's go ahead and save that. Okay. And then we're going to go into the HTML file, and we're going to just modify that a little bit. And put that into the component. And what you'll see here is this code has just taken world out of the hello world and merging in that account name property that we've declared in our JavaScript file. And so what should happen is when we deploy this and we select an account from the pick list, it should replace world with that account name that we've selected. And so let's see if it all works. We can go back into our org, which is on this side of my tabs, and refresh the page. Okay, and drag that onto the page. We now have in our properties, and we have only a single account in this org. I don't know if your org has any other accounts in them, but I can go ahead and click that, and it will replace world with that data from the org. And in this instance, we've been able to take that data and merge it into the email template here in our org. So hopefully everyone online, hopefully everyone in person has been able to get that far. That shows us generally how we can quickly take LWCs and bring them into the builder. Now I will show you a slightly more advanced implementation of this that I built for an app on the App Exchange called Pardot Forms Anywhere. I know it's not called Pardot anymore, I guess, but I'm not going to rename the app Marketing Cloud Account Engagement Forms Anywhere because I don't think that conforms to the App Exchange naming standards, and it might be way too long for the App Exchange to handle it. So I'm going to wait till someone tells me to change it to actually do it. And what this app does, I'll go ahead and open it up into an org. It takes your Pardot forms, if you're familiar with Pardot, and syncs them to your Salesforce org. And so if we open up our settings here, Pardot forms, it will take all of the forms that you have in Pardot, sync them to the org. We've got some settings here that you can run a scheduler. And pretty much when you set this up, it will allow you to reschedule when you would like to sync your Pardot forms. And it will then go ahead and query your Pardot instance and bring them over to Salesforce. The reason for this is that it allows you to select any of your Pardot forms in your email template so that anyone who's building emails in the Lightning email builder will have access to those forms without having to go in Pardot and find the form that they want and copy it over. And so if we go into our email templates in this org, and we click on one of them and edit it. So I've created a template that just takes a free coffee offer and allows you to send it to a user. This demo is on the App Exchange. All of this code is open sourced, as well as the app can be installed from the App Exchange. But what this is I've got a component here called Pardot form. And this component itself allows you to select which Pardot form from the org you would like. It will then replace the hyperlink in that email to the Pardot form, allow you to configure the style of the button, the font color, the style, the border radius, everything through our LWC that we've created. Now, if we go and look at that component, there are about 1 million properties on it. And so in here, we have our, let's see, our Pardot, bear with me, Experience Cloud Form, Form Builder, Form Scheduler. There we are. So in our Pardot Form Builder component, you can see we have many, many public properties to be able to take in all that information. But most importantly, we have our Pardot Form Dynamic Pick List. And all that's doing is querying the org for those Pardot forms. Now, this may seem like it's super simple, and that's because it is. But it makes marketing's lives way easier because they now have direct access to all of the forms that they need. And this is an example of how you can use those dynamic pick lists to go and get data from Salesforce that may be relevant to the email builder and bring that in. Now, this is incredibly niche, but I think super powerful when you start building out components that do like sort of different brand styles based on a company that may have different brands that they're working with, or many Salesforce orgs, or different types of ways that they'd like to represent email, and not have to have their marketers who are building email templates define everything themselves. Because the benefit of having the email builder here and not in setup is that anyone who has permissions can start building email, which means that you as an admin or a developer don't have to do it anymore, hopefully. Cool. So who had no idea this was a thing? Is it kind of cool?
It's very cool.
I mean, I think it shows like the scale and flexibility of Lightning Web Components to do all kinds of really cool things. We will continue on with this in a minute when we go into some of the Nimbus stuff, but that's pretty much it for the Lightning Email Builder. So hopefully everyone can take those instructions from the workshop and run through them and go through some of that stuff. Now, the next bit, we're going to go back to slides for a second. is to talk about the Nimbus components for mobile. So in the room, who knew that we'd released a load of modules for mobile app development? Again, really cool features that just don't get a lot of press because they're not like big, huge things, but really great features for developers. So Nimbus is a framework that enables cross-platform development and access to capabilities for mobile devices in Lightning Web Components. Now, what's great, like I said, it's cross-platform. It works across Android and iOS. It's secure. It uses the proper APIs for accessing things like user locations instead of having to write hacks where you're going outside of the components wrapper to get the location. And they're extensible. So we will be continuing to innovate and release more plugins around the Nimbus framework for Lightning Web Components. Now, currently, there are 4 modules that you can access in your LWCs. There's a barcode scanner that can allow you to scan barcodes and QR codes on mobile devices. There's a GPS module for getting locations. There's a module for accessing the contacts on a user's device. And then there are geofencing APIs for you to get the location and restrict access to certain aspects of your LWCs based on a user's location. So maybe you only want them to access part of a component or part of the data in your Salesforce org when they're in the office or when they're at home. And so using these geofencing APIs, you can block access based on their location. And these are things that a lot of people have been asking for a very long time when it comes to building components for the Salesforce mobile app. Now, today we're going to be looking at one of them. And instead of going and getting hands-on with it, all of the code is in your projects. We're going to walk through it, and then I'm going to show it to you, just because there's a lot more complexity to this than there is to the email builder. But to get you started, all you have to do is import this get barcode scanner method from the new Lightning/mobile capabilities module. And that is all you need to get started with the barcode scanner. Once you instantiate that, you can instantiate it by just calling the get barcode scanner method. You can set some options to it, like the type of barcode that you would like to scan, and then you can just begin capture with the click of a button. So if we go ahead and look at the code here for that, in the project that you have on your computer, in your LWCs, we have a mobile barcode scanner here. And in this component, you will see here, we have our get barcode scanner that we're importing. Keep in mind, you've already deployed this to your org. It's in your org running. I will not be asking you to log into the Salesforce mobile app because that's going to bring in more problems and everyone having to reset their passwords. So I will show it to everyone here in the room, as well as maybe I'll put my phone up to the camera to show it working. However, you'll notice here in our component, in our connected callback, all we have to do is instantiate that barcode scanner by calling the get barcode scanner method. And then when we want to begin the scan, we just instantiate that. We set some options. So we can set the barcode type that we want to scan. In this case, it's a QR code. We can set some instruction text, and then a message to show when scanning is complete. And then when we run that begin capture method, it's literally going to open up the camera on your mobile device, and you don't have to do anything. It will go through, open the barcode scanner, and use your standard device capabilities to scan the barcode. And when that's done, you can then take that result, just like if you were calling an Apex class, just like if you were running another function in your class, do something with the result. And in this case, we're just setting that scan barcode value here. If you think about the use cases, if you work in a company that does a lot of shipping, or you have stuff inside of your business that your reps or your service agents need to scan, they can just open up the Salesforce mobile app, and you can write LWCs to do all of this. Okay? And then you can put in some error handling, and then you can end capture of the device, and then it's all finished. Now, in the HTML file of this component, all we have done is put some style here so that when you open up the component, it will show you that we've got a barcode scanner here. You'll see here some stuff here, some buttons to begin capture. And right here on the on click, that's where we're beginning to handle the scan click. Now, if we open this up in our org, I have a tab in here in this org for the barcode scanner. I don't think I've assigned it in my permission set, so bear with me. This is where we get into a real live demo. Let's add this into the permission set here. Email builder. We've got a barcode scanner tab that I've created. I will update the GitHub project with this new updated permission set after the session today so that everyone can try this out later. But we'll go ahead and make that available and visible. Okay. Okay, and then refresh the page. There we go. We've got our barcode scanner tab here with our component. Now you will notice that button is disabled. That is because this component will only allow you to scan barcodes on mobile devices because it's using your mobile device's APIs. So iPads, iPhones, Android phones, whatever you have, it will check whether or not the scanner was able to be initialized in the connected callback, and then if not allow you to scan a barcode. Now, in the same sense, if I open this up on my phone, open up Salesforce, as that loads up the Wi-Fi, but we should still have our tab. And when we go into our items, we have a barcode scanner, and I'll walk this around the room since I'm not connected. You can see here the button is now enabled. And so from a distance, if I click barcode scanner, it's going to open up my phone's camera, and it will then allow me to scan a QR code from the Salesforce app. And when I scan that, it will then just save that to the record based on what I'm scanning. And it's just an example of how it's really easy to unlock that using these new modules because you don't have to do anything. And so we've got an error there, the barcode scanner has failed for anyone that's virtual. We can scan it, and then you can see we have the camera that opens on the device, and we can scan barcodes. And so, like I said, in those Nimbus components, they're all in the docs, but you have access to all 4 of those that you can now start using in your mobile apps. And so it's really cool. There are more to come. Like we said earlier, so I take part in Release Readiness Live quite a bit. These came out and were GA'd in spring 22. And so if you go back to Release Readiness Live from spring 22, Amina, who runs and is PM for these components, does a great demo, goes in depth with them and talks about some roadmap stuff. It's worth going back and checking the release notes and watching that Release Readiness Live back to see the demo around some of these components because they're really cool and really unlock a lot of mobile development inside of the Salesforce app for developers. And so with that, we publish lots of content, our team. So follow Salesforce devs on Twitter and check out our YouTube channel. We post a lot of videos and we create a lot of original content specifically for that YouTube channel. And that is probably one of the main places that we are posting everything. So check it out and subscribe. And there's loads of great stuff there. Now, does anyone have any questions?
Is any of the code related to the Slack integration? Is that a part of that repo or not?
It's not, no.
Okay.
Not yet. It will be available soon. Once the public beta opens, there's going to be a lot. Like I have so much unbelievably generic code that I want to share for like fetching pick list values and account lookups and stuff. But that will all be available very soon. But really, really cool. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Do you still get the FX dollar limit if you're trying like
yeah. You do, yeah. Yeah, it's an Apex transaction at the end of the day. Although it will always only be in a single threaded context when you open the builder. So you're not going to run into any bulk issues, but just be aware that you've got your limits that still you have to work with. So filter your query.
You also can't do any call-outs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Related to that.
Yeah.
So with the dynamic pick list, that's like a really cool way that we can inject custom properties into our components.
Yeah.
With Flow, there's a thing called custom property editor.
Yeah.
Is there any plan to allow us to make custom property editors for web development?
So that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it. I know that their custom property editors are going to be showing up in another part of Salesforce very soon. That is not the Lightning App Builder, so not to get any hopes up there. But I'm glad to see that there is some use of them coming in other parts of Salesforce, which would lead me to believe that eventually they would make their way into LWCs elsewhere. I will take that away and bring that to the product management team, because I as well would love to see that in LWCs everywhere, because they're really cool.
I use emails as well. So we can define these emails, and I'm going to assume that they're rendered at the time of send, right?
No, they're, well, so your LWCs are rendered at the time of save of the template. And then the email properties, so if you have merge fields in the emails, those are rendered at send. But the properties in the component are locked at save.
Can you do anything on the client side after those emails are rendered in, say, Gmail?
I don't think so at this point. That's a great question. I might take that back to the product team, at least to see what's on the roadmap there. Anyone virtually? Do we have any virtual questions?
They were just asking for links from your deck.
Oh, cool.
So I told them I
Yep.
will share it out.
Yep, we'll share the deck.
Any other questions?
Cool. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentation.
Of course.
This was brilliant.
Mhm. Perfect. Thank you, everyone online. We will continue networking here. Fortunately, it's much easier to do in person. So apologies to anyone who doesn't get to take part after the session.